watching Charlie cut some frames for sailing. On the shipyard tour it is, looking at a sail making loft.
Up in the attic or the eaves of a building. And that led to it being used for loftsmen and sail lofts because they're typically working on their hands and their knees with those fairing battens that I talked about. So they were able to utilize a space like this that might not be usable for other activities like boat building. Just not the headroom for it. Especially if you had a building that really where this roof sloped all the way down to zero out there. So in the boat building world, lofting as a verb means the process of expanding a drawing of about this size up to full size. So that's why that floor space there is leveled out. This building is 120 years old and slowly sinking into the interior that was built on top of it. And so they had to level out that floor to have a reasonably accurate
120
drawing.
years old, sinking
Originally
into
that
the
floor was
cherry
half
pits,
its current width.
which was built
It
in.
got bigger and bigger. When I actually leased this space in 2003, that level floor space went all the way to the last beam down there. So because they were up to 150-foot boats. So they were doing a 150-foot drawing of that. Think about that. Not just one drawing, but 3 full-size drawings. So they would do a plan view, which is a bird's eye view. They would do a profile view, like the side view of the boat. And the lostmen are using their trained eyes and those battens and nails to hold it in place to make sure that all the lines that they're transferring from this size to the big size are smooth, fair curves. The reason they're doing that is if you just took that drawing and multiplied it by 50 mathematically, any discrepancy, even the size of a pencil width, is going to be a 2.5-inch discrepancy in full size. So they're using their eyes to make sure that they're creating a very accurate full-size drawing of the plan view and the profile view. And they're using the intersection of those points to create a third drawing, which is called the body plan, or a section plan. And we're going to walk back over here, and I'm going to show you what that looks like on the wall. Mr. S.A. Long had a whole series of on-beams designed and custom built for himself. They were all successful, very successful racing sailboats. This was his very first one. It was designed by John Alden, built by Palmer Johnson. And this drawing, I came across it. This whole place was just littered with junk up here. They had been lofting up here into the mid-'80s until they moved over to that north building that you've been in. That coincided with them changing to computer lofting. So they haven't done any manual lofting since the mid-'80s. So these were stacked up all around here. There was zero insulation in this building when I rented it. They've been working here for 120 years with just the 1-inch pine boards for the sheathing, roasting in the summertime and freezing in the wintertime. So I decided we were not made of that sturdy material. So I spent a whole winter up here, furred down the overhead, blew in 18 inches of insulation, and used these drawings that were stacked up all over the place because they were way too cool to throw out and a lot better than toting sheetrock up here. So I put them all together, actually figured out how they went together. This drawing was so large I had to cut off, ignore everything below the water line. So this is as if you were Jesus standing on the water right at the bow of the boat. And this is frame number 1, the very bow of the boat. Frame 2, all the way to the midship section. And then on the other side over here is the other half of the boat from the transom going forward to the midship section. So the lostmen worked up here to get this drawing. Then they took the rest of the drawing and painted over it and used it for the next boat. But they saved these because when they were done with their job was done. They sent these drawings down to the fab department, and those guys would cut a frame for each one of these. They'd cut 2 frames, one for the port side of the boat, one for the starboard side of the boat. And they would take those pairs of frames out to where they're going to build the boat, which has got a center line already drawn on the floor. And every 2 feet has got a very carefully drawn perpendicular line called a station line. And they would stand these frames up and very carefully plumb them so they're all perfectly plumb and square. And then for the first time, you can actually step back and see the 3-dimensional shape of the boat. They put stringers around that, they plate it, turn the boat right side up, because it might have been built upside down actually back in those days. Even a fairly large boat might have been built upside down. And then they roll it over and voila, you've got a boat, right? Tired. I could tell that they were not going to buy me the boat I dreamed of, which was back then it was a little Blue Jay that I saw at Fox Valley Mall, which is where I grew up in the Appleton area. And But my mother's explanation is that I was impressed with sailing during the first year of my life. My father was an engineer for Kimberly-Clark Corporation, and the first year that I was alive, he was stationed out in New Milford, Connecticut, supervising a new Kimberly-Clark plant startup up there. So I don't remember it, but they've got pictures of me in a backpack on his back, exploring places like Mystic Seaport and Cape Cod and Boston and all these little famous saltwater areas full of boats. All I know is that by the time I was helping my brothers deliver newspapers, if I saw a sailboat go by on a trailer, I'd be like, "Hey Tom, check that out." He'd be like, "Yeah, whatever, Charlie." You know? But my older brother had built a kayak when he was 12 years old, and I figured if he could do it, I could do it, right? You know, little sibling rivalry. And so when I was 12, I built my first sailboat. It was a sunfish type boat made out of plywood. It was also my first sail making project. I commandeered my mother's Swiss-made Elna sewing machine, much to her misgivings. There was 8 boys and 1 girl in the family, and we all managed to steal her sewing machine occasionally for our various projects. And she complained bitterly about how we messed up the tension on it. And I actually built those sails out of an experimental non-woven paper product that my father developed. He's on the patent rights, listed on the patent rights for it. It's a product you would all recognize as this green non-woven material you see in the hospitals everywhere, you know, those non-woven paper gowns. He brought this big, huge roll of it back to our house. It was one of the first ones off the press, and he said, "Hey Charlie, why don't you try making your sails out of this?" I said, "Dad, it's green." And he said, "Charlie, it's free." I said, "Okay, I've got a point there." He said, "Well, you know, we're trying to find different uses for it." And I did. I built my sails out of those, and it was actually worked out really well. They were lightweight, they did not absorb water, and they were very low stretch. Maybe I should go back to making them like that. So far, we haven't yet made paper sails out of that or blue tarps, but we've had asked questions about that. No, we were using background sail cloth for the most part, and we were also using Mylar technical high-tech stuff too for race sails. But anyways, I went from that to college. Eventually, I went to UW Oshkosh and took sailing course the first opportunity I could, which was a spring year of my freshman year. And the sailing instructor convinced me to come and help teach sailing that summer. And then she twisted my arm to join the sailing team in fall. So I was racing intercollegiately. At that point, I was also racing an Erickson 29 and a Sunfish eventually. I mean, it was named Sunkist. It was actually a E-scow, which is a 28-foot scow. This is all down on Lake Winnebago in the Oshkosh Arena area. Eventually, I was a team captain. In fact, I managed to acquire quite a few credits in college, but never did graduate. I already knew I was fixated on working in the boat world, and there wasn't a lot of benefit to a degree in German and art in the boat building world. So I just eventually left Oshkosh, moved out to the East Coast, worked for a couple of sailmakers out there, eventually branched into boat building, rebuilt a 25-foot wooden boat that I bought with a student loan when I was still in school at Oshkosh, a 1938 Phil Rose design. We sailed that, my wife and I sailed that to the Bahamas and the Florida Keys for our first little cruising adventure. We sold that because we were planning on having a child, and we knew we couldn't fit another person in that little boat. So I spent another 8 years in Charleston designing and building this boat, a 36-foot Sharpie schooner that we lived on board and cruised up and down the East Coast for an equal amount of time. So it kind of paid us back there. So we would homeschool our son when we were underway and traveling until we ran out of money, and then we'd stop somewhere and work for another 8 months or a year until we replenished our cruising kitty, and then we'd go back cruising again. We'd put him in public school when we were working, so we had kind of a mix of public school and homeschooling. And has managed to survive the experience. Actually did quite well at UW Milwaukee, although we were wondering for a while there. If he had showed as little enthusiasm for college as he did for high school, he probably would not have incurred until there. But he actually graduated about 2 years ago and turned around and just kept on working in the bike industry, which is he's been working in since he was 14 years old. So he's currently the product manager for Wheel and Sprocket down in Brookfield, Wisconsin. And doing pretty well. We're proud of him. He still occasionally comes up here to impress a potential girlfriend with taking his dad's boat sailing. Sometimes that's worked for him, sometimes it hasn't. But he's a good kid. We miss him, actually. We're glad to see him when we get the chance. And that kind of covers what I was going to say, and it looks like we probably got another group headed up this way, so thanks for visiting North Soul.
Thank you.
And
Thanks, Charlie.
thank you, Barry. You can always, it's kind of inexplicable, the exact same sale your neighbor gets. I'm going to build a different sale for you than I am your neighbor.
Oh, you're racing?
I'm going to ask you if you're racing. What kind of, are you cruising? Are you single-handing? Do you like to go out when it's white capping, or do you only go out when it's a beautiful sunny day and it's less than 12-mile-an-hour wind and you got your 3 little girls on board, you know? Or are you carrying your hairy-chested, beer-drinking buddies and going out only when it's blowing like snot out there and trying to break things, you know? So I'm gonna build a different sail. It's gonna have a different draft. It's gonna be made on different materials, and it's gonna be custom made for the way you use your boat.